Hi, everybody. Welcome to my session, Empathy in Email and Why Accessibility and Inclusion Make Marketing Harmony. What I'll be talking about today is what is accessibility and why is it important? Email is an important extension of your brand experience. Tactical ways to make your email accessible. We'll be looking at some empathy and story moments, and then finally, how inclusivity impacts your email and your customers and users. My name is Elise Georgeson, and I'm a product designer here at Email on Acid. So what is accessibility and why is it important? So being that the theme of here is email stock, I wanted to kick this off with a personal story of my own, in fact, a concert story. So I decided to go with an 80s, early 90s theme for my presentation. And what you see here is a picture of me in the middle with the bangs and the 80s and the early 90s attire. So 55, I have no idea what that is or what team that, some like random shirt design, but I think I wore that shirt to death. So the lady on the right, of course, needs no introduction, but this is Whitney Houston. And anyway, for my 8th grade birthday, I wanted to see Whitney Houston more than anything. And my parents begrudgingly paid for a friend and I to go have this like amazing first concert experience. And so I'm originally from Minnesota. So back in the day, my mom dropped me off at my friend and I at the Metrodome in Minneapolis. And we got there an hour early, had just waited months and months for this concert experience to happen. And so we finally get to our seats and we wait and we wait. And we waited for Whitney to come on stage, and she was an hour and a half late. So finally she arrives on stage, and then everybody starts to stand up. And then, of course, you know, we're not the only ones looking 80s. There's people right in front of us with the big 80s hair and outfits. And so we're trying to see Whitney. And so after all that, the performance was just so-so. And the sound was just okay. They were having some technical difficulties. So needless to say, I never saw Whitney again. And I just didn't feel as maybe in love with her as I did before this concert experience. So I just kind of wanted to see, and I think the answer is yes, that have you had a concert experience like this before? So you have these two sides of it. Sometimes it's a performer that you can't wait to see and you're blown away by, or you're disappointed by, or maybe it's a performer that you don't know much about, but you pay for the money to see them and they're just amazing in the performance arena. But I guess I want to put it in the frame now of accessibility and your email strategy experience. So what if your customer or your user's first experience with your brand was like this? So are your emails accessible for screen readers? What are they hearing when they get to experience your email? Are you giving them a great experience to come back to? Or are you only giving them the sort of obstructed view and mediocre experience? So what is accessibility? So I think the definitions of accessibility can definitely range from very technical to general. But I saw this and I just thought this made so much sense. Accessibility is really the ability to access. So it's simply designing so that everyone has the ability to access the experience and content that you've created for them. Why should you care about accessibility? So more than 61 million Americans have physical or mental disabilities, both temporary and permanent. So that's 1 in 4 people just in the United States. And so when you think about those numbers, it's too big to not include or consider. And so that kind of leads into this next part here, that email is really an extension of your brand experience. So take, for example, a fully accessible email. Now, that may be the difference between somebody making a purchase or a new membership subscription, or somebody never looking at your email again. This next slide here talks about design thinking and how we can kind of bake in this process to our email strategy. So being on the product design side, user experience and doing the upfront research is really important to inform every decision that we make. And so I thought this isn't something that you typically think about when you're talking about your overall email strategy, but I think it's worthwhile to visit this. So this is a diagram from Nielsen Norman Group, and they're kind of the industry leaders in user experience. So it starts off with these 3 buckets: understand, explore, and then materialize. And then it gets broken down into empathizing. So you're conducting that research, you're understanding your users, whether that's interviews or surveys. The next step is defining. So you're combining all of your research and you're really trying to see where their pain points are. The next step is ideating and coming up with a range of ideas and creative solutions to solve those pain points, and then prototyping, so building real tactical designs. So that could be something that we call, a wireframe, or something that's just, maybe it's a quick sketch of how you might want to lay out your imagery and your content and your calls to action. And then testing that with users and saying, what do you think of this? Does this resonate with you? Is it easy enough to understand? And then when you finally get to the implementation stage, when you launch, hopefully you have all of those pain points resolved, and you have this incredibly successful email campaign. So this is cyclical. So it doesn't stop our ability and opportunity to find out how and what our customers think, and then we start the process over again. Keller's brand equity model. So I thought this was really interesting to consider in terms of brand experience and that whole range of emotions and considerations that a customer goes through in your brand experience. So that first one is identity. Who are you? So this is just making sure that your brand perceptions, how customers perceive you, how every touch point with your customers is a positive one, and making sure it's correct at each stage of the buying or engaging process. Number 2, performance. So it really defines how well your product meets your customers' needs. So that's, reliability, efficiency, style, and maybe price. And then imagery, of course. So from a social and psychological level, are your customers feeling represented in your imagery? Are they resonating with what they're looking for? Number 3, response. What about you? So this really speaks to the judgments and the feelings that your customers are going through at this stage. So this encompasses credibility, quality, not only the actual quality of your product, but your perceived quality. Are you considering their unique needs? And then superiority. What makes this customer want to choose your brand over maybe your competitors? And then step 4, finally, resonance. So what about you and me? So this is taking a look at how your customers are engaging with you, how invested they are personally, and the time that they spend maybe talking to their friends and neighbors. So this is like active engagement, and this is something that you can monitor on social media. They're your biggest brand ambassadors. So when you're putting your customer journey or your email together, I think taking these things into consideration and really empathizing everything that your customers are going through and making their decisions is really important. And now we get into the fun stuff, right? How to actually make your emails accessible. So this first one is Preheader, and just kind of want you to take a look for a minute at which one you think is the more successful Preheader. Is it the Roadrunner Sports or the Nova Canoes? So if you chose the Nova Canoes, you are right. So some of the great things going on about this one, it's simple, it's descriptive, it's non-repetitive. So, you know, the way I see the Preheader is it's kind of that gateway into the brand experience and the customer journey and your email. And screen readers are reading this. So if this part isn't nailed, your customers and users are going to be less apt to even open your email. Design. So of course, this is an incredibly crucial step in accessibility. And I think I've read kind of a research statistic that, you know, 90% of your accessibility issues can be mitigated in the design stage or in the research stage, and you know how you're creating that process of putting your email together. So really important things like does your color contrast pass? So there are a lot of contrast checkers online today, and I can give you some of those, but is there a good amount of text and not all images in your email? And I'll show you what that looks like in a couple of slides when you have an image heavy or all image email and the problems that it can cause. Is your font at least 16 pixels? How is Zoom looking? Are your links underlined and are they descriptive? Are your long paragraphs center aligned, which is a no-no? Are your buttons the size of your thumb? Is there enough white space so that it makes your email easily scannable? And is your code semantic? So these are all great things to consider. And then even using fonts for dyslexia. So the more unique a font is, the better it's going to be for people that have dyslexia. This is just a diagram that shows how designing for the extremes really benefits everyone. So you hit that sweet spot in the middle where it's the optimal experience for everyone if you're designing for the extremes. ARIA tags. So that's accessible rich internet applications. These are some great things to do when you're coding your email. Adding in that role presentation. Buttons. The role equals button, ARIA pressed false. Making sure that that button appears as a control to the screen reader, and making sure that it reads it back as a button. So your screen reader can tell your users what needs to be done there to take action. Bulleted lists using ULs and LIs and OLs so that your screen reader can actually read it back to your customers in a list format instead of reading bullets. And it's not as descriptive. Personalized content. So this is a big one. You know, if you're using personalized content, you've taken that extra step to code that. But if the ARIA tags aren't updating it real time, that means that your customer and your screen reader isn't going to be reading correct information for that particular customer. Alt tags. This is a big one. So making sure that you're giving your customers the full experience. So for some customers, this is really, in a sense, how they are seeing your email. And the more descriptive you can be with your alt tags within reason, really gives an opportunity for people who are using screen readers, the idea, this chance to kind of visualize what the content is in their mind. So I know this isn't always popular, but I think alt tags on everything is really important. Again, kind of creating that that visual so they can see it in their mind. Being descriptive, it's how people are shopping and learning. So if you've got an image, describe what that image looks like. If you're trying to sell something in an email, like a concert t-shirt with Whitney on it, maybe you don't want to say concert t-shirt with Whitney Houston. Maybe you want to describe the fabric that you're using, the colors, the little details, the fit. So copywriters should be writing alt tags, and don't put that heavy lift on developers or designers. Copywriters are already writing your email. It wouldn't take much longer to just bake this into the process of having them write the alt tags. And then when images don't load right away, you don't want to be without alt tags. So, you know, whether it's a screen reader or just, you know, for any general user, if you're waiting for images to load, right away with the alt tags, the descriptive alt tags, your customer, your user can get an idea of what they're about to see, or hopefully, you know, in case they don't see it for whatever reason, you know, hopefully they will get the image to load eventually. But then styling the alt text is really important too. We've taken the time and care to make sure the font size is big enough in your email, but making sure that the alt tag has the same consideration there in styling. And then overall, just showing your customers that you care about them. So in this audience, or you know, in accessibility with temporary or permanent impairment, think of how great that your customers' experience would be if you just considered some of these simple things. And then this is just an example of how to style the alt tag, a code snippet of what that could look like. So some not to-dos, repeating alt tags, that's just not giving your customer much information at all. And this is what your email would look like if you didn't have any alt tags. It's just all images. So creating a pretty poor experience there. And then you can see here, you know, the alt tags that are not descriptive. So this is an example of campaign pre-check and how you can kind of run through these different accessibility steps. Motor control considerations with keyboard. So some tips here. Stop using divs and use semantic HTML, so tables with the role presentation. Always provide an option to skip that main navigation. Not all of your users are going to want to hear what's in your main navigation in your email if you have one. And don't remove the focus indicators. So more and more people are, you know, digesting and looking to have a bigger sense of control over their content, and they're using their keyboard to navigate through your email. So again, so stepping in the right direction with campaign pre-check and making sure that you're doing your due diligence and testing. So I would encourage you, if you haven't signed up for a free trial for Email on Acid, do that. Take a look at the automated accessibility experience. It's pretty efficient and quick and easy. And I think you'll see the benefits right away from doing that. So what is a presentation about empathy without talking about the customer, and really putting stories to some of what people are dealing with. So designing and building for humanity. I was really intentional in picking out these images that did kind of tell a story. And maybe it's not, what you would normally perceive as people that have disability or impairments. But again, now that we have all kinds of different mobile devices and we're looking at content on the go, people are looking at and working outside, especially with this last year, kind of wanting to get out and not feel cooped up. This older gentleman here is looking at his mobile device. So if people are looking at their screens in the sunlight, making sure that the fonts are big enough, color contrast is supported. So really keeping in mind all these different kinds of situations that your customers are in when they're looking at your content. So I love to queue. And I found these accessibility stories, and they're just little videos of accessibility stories, and they really give you a chance to empathize and hear what people are going through. This particular story is about Ryan, and he's a teacher. He teaches computer and Braille at Blind Incorporated, and he really wants to bring literacy, put literacy in the hands of everyone. So he talks a bit about here. Some people go blind later on in life, and they don't know what accessibility is, and they don't know what inaccessibility is. They just remember that being sighted and using the internet and using a computer was a really easy thing for them to do. So when you think about this idea of, temporary visual impairment or maybe permanent, maybe this doesn't happen until, later on in life for whatever reason. So think about, you could be designing for yourself in the future, making these choices for a family member. So I think when you start to empathize and put it in that frame of mind, it's kind of that motivator to start working on some of these accessibility pieces. This is Buna, and she runs her own business, really inspirational story. She's a motivational speaker and mentor. And she says here, I've said over and over, accessibility is the one thing we must do. We must implement usability with the accessibility piece. To me, that's very important. And in her story, she talks about wanting to market her business on LinkedIn and Facebook, and how sometimes creating a few posts can just take her 5 to 6 hours. So then that's really, in some cases, it's really frustrating for people to try to engage in something that's not accessible. And then finally, just the huge impact that inclusivity has on accessibility, and just your brand experience in general. So by making the choice to not include, you are impacting your users' choices. So if your users aren't feeling like they're included in the way you're speaking to them, that could be, or the way you're representing them, we're starting to think a lot more finally now about gender and pronouns, stereotypes and visuals, making sure, how you're speaking to your audience is represented in a diverse way. And so, if you don't intentionally include, then you're unintentionally excluding, and they're going to go elsewhere if they're not feeling like they're included. One thing I wanted to show you here was this amazing inclusivity tool. This is something I recently found, and it's called Cards for Humanity. So check this out online. It's these it serves, so you click on that deal a new pair, and then it'll show you these cards. So on the left-hand side, you have this persona, somebody's name, age, again, trying to empathize and understand the frame of mind that your customers might be in. And then on the right-hand side, maybe it's impairment, or maybe it's a struggle that that this person is dealing with. So, and then when you view the needs of this person, which is on the right-hand side here, it presents some considerations. So trying to think about this person as a whole and how you might be able to meet their needs, include them, or design and develop for them. So some other really great sites to visit for inclusivity are Gender Decoder. So you can put in your content, and then it'll tell you if your content is leaning to masculine or feminine. There's one called the Hemingway app that, again, you can put your content in. It'll show you at what kind of grade level your content is reading at. And then again, this Cards for Humanity. So it's a person and a trait, and then, you know, informational tips on how you can meet their needs. So it was my absolute pleasure to talk to you today about inclusivity and accessibility, and the impacts that it can make on your brand. And we all say that accessibility isn't just a project, it's a process. So I think when you're thinking about inclusivity and accessibility, it's just taking one small step or two small steps and kind of baking that into your process, iterating and testing, and then you can grow kind of what that process looks like. But hopefully you got something out of my talk today, and would love to see you keep rocking on with accessibility and inclusivity. And I would love to open it up to any questions that you might have at this time. Hi, everybody.
Oh, man. Elise, how's it going?
How's it going? Good. First, I want to thank you for adding Prince to the playlist collection, because being from Minneapolis, it's a no-brainer. I should have included that one, and so that was pretty awesome.
I had to. It's my jam. It's one of my favorite jams. Well, I just want to get some quick Q&As with you really quick before we have to move on to the next session, but that was an amazing talk as always. Let me see here. We got some questions here. Let me see. Let me pull these up. Okay. So first and foremost, someone wanted to know, common mistakes. What are some common mistakes people might make when trying to make accessible emails?
Common mistakes. I think just not including the basic things like I went through with design and, color contrast, font size, not using semantic HTML to make sure that your email is looking good and every email client, doing that upfront research, doing that upfront check. So I will just say it, but using a tool like Email on Acid to take you through and show you where you're kind of hitting or missing the mark is really important. So leaning on those tools and then just doing the basic things, starting somewhere.
Perfect. Okay. Now, how about this? So someone asked, what if we're acting as a third party to promote someone's offer? It's really difficult to make our own identity and build relationships with customers. What would be the best way to deal with this?
That's an interesting use case. And I'm not sure I'm totally understanding, but I can try. So I think you just start by asking questions and learning a little bit more about your customers or that particular audience. So maybe it's something like getting together a creative brief and reaching out and asking them a little bit more about, who they are, what they're looking for. It kind of goes back to that Keller's brand equity model. But I think starting somewhere is always better than nothing, and just be curious and ask the questions.
Awesome. I think this is a good combo question, but someone asked, why is underline important? And 2, are emojis safe for accessibility?
So definitely underlining your links are important from the visual aspect of it. And emojis, I mean, we have that, are they big enough for people to see? So that's always a concern, the size. And then with color contrast, again, are they accessible in terms of low vision? And then another thing, I know, a lot of emojis are vetted, but that kind of brings me back to like global accessibility, and is using the right emoji in the right context appropriate? So I guess I would look at those things. Just do your research with your customers and audience.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me see here. And then, okay, we've got one last one for you. Which format is more good in email design, the table format or the div format? And also, does it help in inboxing if we use div tag format for email design?
I would definitely say HTML is better. Anytime you can use semantic HTML, this is something you must do.
Awesome. And that's it, folks. Well, Elise, you had an amazing presentation. Thank you for coming out to us all the way from Minnesota. And I know you are in Milwaukee, but the great tundra. Yeah, great Midwest. I love me and her talking about earlier that I'm always venturing out there with my fiance, especially during the winter time. So oh my goodness, love it out there.
Brave soul.
Oh yeah.
Coming winter.
So cold, my hair breaks off.
Oh, I feel your pain.
Oh yeah. Elise, oh my goodness, it was so great to have you on. It was so great to have you for this session, and I can't wait for the future for us to work on some more content together. All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, and a great follow-up to Najee, too.
Awesome. Elise, thank you for being here. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.